Did you know I was personally dragged into the whistleblowing about the sexual abuse, trafficking of vulnerable women at the nonprofit organization with a false accusation by the female central to my story? I had support from some famous people like
One man told me about being beaten by the police and left permanently disabled because of a woman's false allegation.
Hello, it's October 2025. Now, this video is inspired by a ridiculous video that I had recently seen, which lasts maybe just over a minute. And it's on the topic of sex trafficking. Now, over the many years, I've discussed this topic in depth, even dedicated videos to this topic with first-hand knowledge and experiences. For example, when I was a young child being passed around, to when I was in my mid-teens, literally being trafficked by women. And also from the perspective of the woman that I married, being duped into being trafficked, and ultimately she would be picked up again and trafficked to Africa. And finally, I have the perspective of having first-hand knowledge, witnessing the sexual abuse, trafficking of vulnerable women at a mental health nonprofit organization, which was, perhaps still is, being funded by the Alberta government 60%. So I have 4 literal first-hand perspectives on this topic. And also, I'm going to add, there are other first-hand experiences which I will get into later on as I address 7 points of this short video, which is absolute nonsense. Now, what I find really frustrating is when you have these beta men tainted by feminism and feminist narratives speaking on something they have absolutely no clue about, vilifying men. And this is a problem we have in today's world in the Western culture. Thank you to feminism. And I've said repeatedly over years that I guess you can call me an anti-feminist. And there are plenty of people who have dedicated their lives exposing feminism and who have a far greater knowledge base than I do, although I do have some, and I recommend looking up these people, especially their older content, to really understand why. But now I digress. So this beta feminist male went on this rant about sex trafficking and blaming men and the whole 9 yards, and there's not one thing that he said that was accurate or correct. And I will challenge him or the person interviewing him to have a discussion on this, and I guarantee I will shut them down. Now, it appears that this interview, this person is talking on behalf of or something. There's I believe there's a website called buyher.com, and I looked into it, and it appears to be a movie, and I didn't watch the movie. It's even on all video platforms, including this one. Just kind of skipped through it and just thought it was kind of ridiculous, but whatever. Perhaps it tells a fictional story or a story based on real life events. I don't know, don't care. I want to address these 7 points that this beta man got all wrong. And the problem is, people who don't know any better will listen to this person and accept what they say as fact. And this is very misleading, and this puts people on these silly little tangents in the Western culture. Now, I'm going to be going over these points, so just bear with me.
The problem is men. It's undoubtedly men.
So right off the top, this beta man states that the problem with sex trafficking is men, which is false. Most times, women, females, are lured in by other women. And these other women not only, for example, lure them in and profit from it, but also use women and men that they lure in for their own benefits, we'll just say. So right off the top, he starts off with a false claim.
By far the most buyers are men, the most sellers are men, so I'm not saying that's an easy fix, I'm saying we know what the problem is.
Then he makes the claim that most of the people buying women are men. That's false. Women will buy women as well as men at an equal amount, slightly more than equal, and this is just a falsehood stated by him.
And so if we can get enough men to live in their authentic, true, helpful, positive self, of what they should be, of honoring and respecting women and children and taking care of their responsibilities, then we're going to see human trafficking decline.
His solution to this is that men should change their position on honoring and protecting, etc., women, and this will stop sex trafficking. No, that's a false claim. In fact, it's men that respect and honor women the most in the Western culture. It is women, through feminism and vilifying men, that have lost respect and honor for men, vilifying men at every turn. And this guy, this beta man, is a classic example of where the respect and honor and etc. is not given to men.
Because if a guy's hanging out with his buddies on a Friday night and suddenly somebody wants to go to the strip club or do whatever they're going to do, the good, strong man's going to step up out of a relationship and say, we're not doing that tonight. Well, why not?
So then he claims that a good, strong man would tell his buddies, hey, we're not going to the strip club tonight because we are not going to take advantage of women that work there. This is another false claim. Women who strip are the ones in absolute control and take advantage of the men. Men will sit there and not necessarily, most times, if not almost all the time, not fantasize about just having sex with the woman, but romanticize in their own minds about having a relationship with that woman. Or perhaps in extreme cases, they will fantasize their wife or girlfriend to be more like them in bed. That's a fact. If you ever observe men in a strip bar who, for example, come alone or maybe in pairs, they sit there very quietly and I'm just trying to think of a word, just quietly, we'll just say. Now, how do I know all this? Because in my previous career, a long time ago, I frequented these places from a work perspective. And I really had the opportunity to see how everything works, not only, for example, with female strippers and men, but male strippers with female customers. And there's a huge contrast with that. So when men go to strip bars alone, or as I said, maybe even 2 or 3, they sit there very calm, and this is what's going through their minds. Now, you will have groups, usually young men in groups, for example, celebrating something, or even something like someone getting married, one of their buddies getting married, and they will party it up and be rowdy and everything else. But those are extreme exceptions because they're in a different mindset. So when you look at, for example, women who go to see male strippers, they are the ones that become very animalistic with mostly lustful thoughts and act out on those thoughts, being a problem to the strip club, because they really act out or try to whatever is going on in their minds, especially when alcohol is involved. So there's a huge contrast between men and women in these environments. So no, a strong man is not one who would say to his buddies, hey, we're not going to take advantage. The women on stage or at a table dance are the ones taking advantage of men. They're the ones taking the man's money. And there are a lot of men who go to these places who basically spend their whole paycheck just to have some interaction with, for example, a female. And a lot of times they just want to sit and talk. And again, they're not looking at this woman as an object, rather trying to win favor for potential relationship.
Because I'm not going to let us, and here's why. Most of the women you're going to see there don't want to be there. They'd rather be somewhere else. We're not going to go pay money and watch them be abused. We're not doing that. That's not what we're doing.
Now, we're getting into most women who do this type of work, stripping, don't want to be there. That's another false claim. Most of the women who do this type of work don't see sex the way, for example, most of society does, or their nudity. No different than, say, going to a nudist camp. You're walking around naked, you might as well get paid for it. Now, I'm just going to segue for a moment, touching on the previous debunking and this one. I do recall there was one night I was in one of these establishments, and just want to say that I personally don't have any care for myself to go to these kind of places. Again, it was all work related. But there was a feminist sitting there, and I noticed her, and it was a quiet evening. There wasn't really anything going on, and my job was pretty much just whatever it is. There was no worries, we'll just say. So I ended up talking to her, and she had this whole feminist narrative. Now, at the time, this is going back decades, I really didn't understand the whole feminist idea, the ideologies and narratives. But she wanted to set out and prove how men are basically animals. And I explained to her what I said previously and what I'm about to say, and she sat back stunned and realized that her whole theory for her paper was wrong. Absolutely wrong. And she actually thanked me for that when I started pointing things out. And I said, look at that guy over there, and look at those couple of guys over there. They're quiet. And she started to see this. Now, as for women, most women not wanting to do that profession, again, for someone who doesn't have an issue, for example, with nudity, whether it be at a nudist colony or modeling nude or whatever, going on stage is just being naked on stage. It doesn't have the same impact for some people. I'll even interject now my own personal perspective, and a lot of people watching, following, probably don't know this about me, but there was a time where I did model nude. I used to go to nudist camps, and the modeling nude could be anything from being like a centerpiece for a buffet table, naked, to photo shoots, to all sorts of stuff. For me, nudity wasn't anything that I shied about. And perhaps that's the European side of me, going to these nudist camps and whatever. And I actually did, I hate to admit this to the world, but I did strip 2 times just to try it out, just for more for fun. And I couldn't believe when I was modeling nude, and even though that 1 or 2 times people were paying me to do something that I did at home every day. Now, these women who want to do more than just dancing, maybe they want to act out something, they're acting out their fantasies, and a lot of them do, how should I say, word crafting, do climax while performing, because that's part of their fantasy. It's not to say all women, because there are some who are forced into it, but that's a different tangent which I've discussed extensively before.
It starts with us as a society saying, enough, no more. You can't think of anything worse happening to your child or your grandchild, but because it's largely invisible, people aren't taking it seriously.
Now, what this guy is implying here is that all men, or most men, or whatever percentage of men, are predators. They're the ones that society, in the West anyway, have to fear. Another false claim by this beta man who has drank the Kool-Aid on the feminist narratives. When you look at the NISVS, the CDC, Scientific American, all these other papers, women commit all these acts at a far higher rate than men, but in the Western culture, no one talks about it. Women commit, for example, the acts of, I'm not going to say it, as well as the acts of, I'm not going to say it, far more than men. Women also commit this at far higher rates in domestic violence, crimes. They use their sexuality to manipulate men, and even having others, usually other men, commit crimes on their behalf. Society, in the West at least, never discusses these things. And I'm setting aside other examples, a plethora of other examples. And we're not going to forget, for example, paternity fraud, where studies show that more than 50% of fathers are not the biological fathers of the child that they're raising. Paternity fraud. And I'm not going to even discuss, for example, the murdering of babies, which is called this. So this whole vilification of men is just a feminist narrative, and this is what's destroying the Western civilization, allowing the opportunity for others to come in and take over.
We need good, strong men and women to rise up and confront the predators. It's predatory behavior.
And finally, the last false claim in this very short video clip of this beta man talking, and no one should listen to him, is about men and creating the demand to buy sex. No, not true. One, we have hypersexualization in the Western culture. And there's a whole tangent, a deep tangent, on why this is and who's behind it to destroy the Western civilization. But now we're going to go off on this other tangent here and say that it's not only the hypersexualization in the Western culture, but the culture itself, because of, you guessed it, feminism. Feminism has created an interpersonal catastrophe between men and women who are in relationships that would normally be healthy, strong relationships. And we have women who are saying, well, I don't feel like it, so if I don't feel like it, you're not getting any. And sometimes women will use that to withhold that gratification for men in spite or whatever, or as a tool to get what they want. And this ultimately is what's frustrating men. Eventually men will go seek out alternatives. Now, I'm not stating or implying that a woman should do anything against her will. However, if you're in a relationship, there's a give and take. And men's sex drive is far different than a woman. Now, there are women who decide to think that they're a man and took male hormones and then decided this was wrong and went back. And there's interviews you could look up where they're saying how they never understood men's sexuality, how it's a hunger that is constant, almost never satisfied. So for a woman to say, well, you're not getting any, makes they don't feel like it, is very difficult. Now, of course, men are not, 99.9% of men are not going to force themselves upon a woman. Women always talk about, the most extreme cases, which is less than 1% of the population, but I digress. But as a favor to the man, the woman could say, okay, we'll do this instead of that, and I understand, basically have an understanding for the man, and men will reciprocate that as well, perhaps if not sexually, in other ways. So I'm not saying, let me just say it this way: if you're at the point, this is for men and women, where pleasuring someone that you're with is a task, an effort, then you're not with the right person, or your relationship already has other issues, right? So I just wanted to address these 7 points briefly. I could have gone more in depth and given more examples and so forth. I just don't want to stretch this out to be a 5-hour video. Just want to give you some things to think about, and be cautious of people like this beta man talking nonsense, vilifying his own gender. Perhaps he thinks he's winning favor by the other gender, women, by doing so. I don't know. I'm not in this guy's head, and I don't want to be. Just to have some things to think about in this brief rebuttal. And I'm willing to challenge anyone, or anyone can challenge me, however you want to look at it, on this topic. Anyway, thank you for watching. Please like, subscribe, comment, and share. Just remember, I was one man against many. Fighting a losing battle, but I still fought to the end.
That means press on. That means endure. That means God cannot fail, and you're not going to give up. That's not an option for a child of God. This means you are going to do it. Listen to this and write it down if you can't remember it. You're never going to outgrow warfare. You simply must learn to fight. I hear people say to me, oh, when is it going to get easier? When you die.